what you're doing with Daily Dose of Wisdom and where you want to take your viewer to? Like, what would you say is is it just having interesting conversations that you find interesting? Like, what would you say the North Star is?
It's a really good question. What I will say is I don't have a 10-year plan
Mm-hmm.
that's fixed and I'm aiming at rolling out. I'm surprised with suddenly having a decent audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I am asking myself that exact question
Mm-hmm.
of how do I best steward this audience? And I am convinced that simply ingesting content cannot be the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm starting to think about creating community within that, creating a space where, because I get a lot of emails from people who have tough questions or who are working through some doubt or are seeking. And right now it's responding to those emails, one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really thinking about how best to, create a space where those types of conversations can be facilitated
Mm-hmm.
and where you can have a judgment-free zone where it's like, it's okay to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Doubt is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
And doubt, when dealt with properly, will give way to deeper faith.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I experienced. And that's what I really believe. And questions should not be shied away from. They should be leaned into, because at the bottom of every question is a brilliant answer, I believe, because God is not a trickster. And so that is what I'm starting to think about, is how to offer more value, to this YouTube audience beyond just another piece of content, but to connect, how to connect with these people who are emailing me these big questions in a better manner than just, a 20 paragraph graph long email.
Yeah,
Here's my
yeah.
life story and all my questions, doubts, and concerns. It's like, man, I want to help this person. This is real stuff. You can't just leave this unread. This
Yeah.
is like serious. This
Yeah.
is this person's life. But at the same time, I, as an individual, don't have the bandwidth to write a essay response to every individual email. So just figuring out how to best kind of steward all that.
Yeah, that's good. I think community is obviously the pathway forward. I think creating spaces for people to come together, I think, is very, very helpful in person. Like, I think so much of the internet's great, but I think, like, man, if we can get people in the room, and then preferably from just in the room to doing life with other people,
Mm-hmm.
I think is super helpful. Before you did the creative stuff on your own, you said you told me off camera that you ran a business, which I also think contributes to where you're at now. Tell me a little bit about the type of business you ran, which is totally not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And what would you say some of those lessons were that you had in terms of the stuff you don't want to do and how it prepared you for the stuff you are doing now?
Yeah. So this was right when COVID hit. So I had, like, between the documentary and the business that I'm about to talk about, I had done basically freelance videography and, weddings and videos for businesses and stuff like that. But when COVID hit, that took a huge hit because people didn't want someone coming in to their place anymore. People didn't have the same budget that they had. It was
Even in Florida?
even in Florida, yeah. DeSantis, yeah. Even in Florida, it was literally 80% drop in everything across the board within a few month period. It was just like boom.
Yeah.
Retainer clients all of a sudden no longer. And so
Horrifying.
it was clear that I needed to make a pivot.
Yeah.
Making a long story short, I had a buddy whose dad owned a franchise of home healthcare agencies.
Okay.
Through conversations with him, he started telling me more about it, this and that. It costs this much to buy the whole, business in a box. And, we'll help you with the legal side, the paperwork, the software, the training, the this and that. So my wife and I talked about it, and I was like, you know what? Desperate times. Doesn't feel super in alignment with everything else that my life has been about. But like I said, we're trying to get pregnant and let's just do it. So I did that, and it actually went well from a business perspective, but it was also a really good lesson for me in where if your only motive is money, at least for me and my personality, you can very quickly realize that whatever dollar amount you're getting is just not worth it.
Yep.
This was the type of job where I was getting phone calls at 2 a.m. People are calling out, there's like legal threats on the horizon because of a medication that wasn't managed properly because
Mm.
of this. There was just all of these situations
Mhm.
that were going on. And the entire job was basically like damage control, crisis management,
Mm.
and getting chewed out by by clients.
Yeah.
And just like I said, a schedule that's totally unpredictable. Now, I have to say this. I have the utmost respect for people that do this.
Yeah.
I know that other people can manage all this better than me. People create teams where they bifurcate, that role into different positions and they
Mhm.
actually are able to make it work. So I'm not trying to dump on the whole industry.
Yeah.
I'm merely describing that for me it was a disaster.
How long did you do that for?
1 year.
And how successful was it?
It was very successful.
Yeah. So financially, it's very successful, but
Yeah.
your soul is getting zapped
Yes.
despite the money being good.
Yes, and I also ran into problems too where like the clients are these old it's a family
Mhm.
who's it's very personal.
Mhm.
It's a family where the mom has dementia
Mm.
and she needs assistance throughout her day. But the amount of money that the family has to pay for is not always the same as the level of care that she
Mm.
needs. Then you have, on the other hand, a caregiver who might just be an amazing person
Mhm.
and who is working 50, 60, 70 hours a week because she's a single mom and
Mhm.
she's trying to pay for her kids and her family.
Mhm.
So you get into this situation where if you have compassion, it gets really, really hard to run this business
Mm.
because you want to offer them the hours that they need but cannot afford. You want
Mm.
to pay the caregiver the amount of money that they need, and all of a sudden your business model just gets squeezed into where like that gap can entirely close.
Mm.
And you can there I mean literally there were several different cases or whatever you want to call them. I guess you would call them cases where I, as the agency, was making $0.
You just you weren't even breaking
And there
even.
was some where I
Yeah.
was losing money,
Yeah.
but I was offering care to a family that I knew they wouldn't have been able to get it in any other manner.
Yeah.
So that was the problem was for me. It was too personal. It was too
Yeah.
close to home. And I was
Yeah.
just too much like, I know this woman and she needs it. And I know
Yeah.
this caregiver and she needs it. And I
She
was,
needs the hours. She needs the services. I'll reduce my margins.
yeah.
So that these people can.
And I had friends who were doing this, or I got to know some of the other owners, and everyone's like, "You're terrible at this.
Mm.
You increase the hourly rate there, and keep the caregiver price the same, and so that you have some skin in the game, man." So, anyways, without going too much into that, it just for me was a bad fit. It was too personal. It was too close to home.
Yeah.
Just not a good fit at any level, and extremely stressful.
So it sounds like the lesson you learned was one, don't just do stuff if it's financially successful.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Is I think that it is a mistake to not consider and not to talk through with God. Who am I?
Yeah.
How have you made me?
Yes.
What are my gifts? What
Yes.
are my talents? What are my interests?
Yeah.
And what type of plow should I be putting my hand to?
That's
God,
good. That's
rather than where's the money?
So don't do it just for the money. Two, do it with a certain degree of your own interest and wiring and passions. Because if the money is bad, but at least you have skin in the game in the sense that you're interested and passionate about what you're doing. And by passionate, I don't mean like you have good feelings towards the work. I mean passionate in the sense of the Jesus word of passion. You're willing to suffer for this cause.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like doing something like that when the money's not there over time, not always, but can eventually the profits will come. Eventually the thing will turn around if you're deliberate and you're intentional and you're educated. So it sounds like that's another one. It's like, don't just do stuff that you're not interested in. And then what would you say from that experience prepared you into what you're doing now as a solopreneur on YouTube?
Well, for one, it gave me a contrast that I'm forever in debt to, because I'll always have that marker of how miserable I can be doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And even on a hard day of doing whatever, it will never be as hard as that, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has offered me that valuable contrast that I'm grateful for.
Mm.
Also, it made me way more organized, systematic. It basically forced me to grow up in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how you're an artist, you're a creative, and I don't know obviously all the idiosyncrasies of your personality, but the stereotype is that we can sometimes be more willy-nilly about how we do things. It's not always true, but it is kind of true with me. I'm usually the person who's not keeping track of I'm not counting every bean, and that job basically forces you to, or else you're gonna get sued. You have to,
attention to detail.
You have to.
Yeah.
You literally have to know everything that's going on. And so, yeah, I think in that sense, it was good. It was the school of hard knocks for me. It was like boot camp, and I think God used it, like I said, psychologically to give me a reference point that makes me more grateful for everything post it. And I think also it was a time of equipping.
Interesting. Okay. Any other transferable wisdom you would have from that situation that you would give to aspiring creators that perhaps they're in that season? Perhaps they're in a season that the money's not even good. They're just in a season of suffering. They just got to suffer. They're fresh out of college, maybe they're fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
And school hard knocks, and they're like, man, I see what you're doing. I see what Ruslan's doing. I'd love to do something similar. What advice would you have for them from that?
I think that people, and this is cliche, but it's very true, people don't look at the roadmap that anyone has gone through to get to the place that they want to be at. And the reality is, it's very rarely that you go from 0 to 100. Usually behind the curtain is a long story of trial and error and mistakes and lessons and things that in a painful, arduous, long format way are then slowly implemented into the recipe for success. People see success and they think that it comes overnight, but I mean, my story, like I said, is definitely not linear at all. And I'm not even saying that I, have that much success or whatever, but in the sense of feeling pretty confident that I am where God wants me to be and that I'm using certain skills that he's given me as best as I can for the glory of God. Let's call that success. It's a process and it's a bumpy road. And the biggest thing I would say, I think, is don't be hasty. And at the same time, always be learning, because it really is through knowledge and through, even like we were talking about your setup here, it's ultimately just it's just knowledge that allows things, to work better. So I would say this as well. If someone's listening to this and has a big dream, but is in the middle of something that is making it impossible to make any kind of progress toward that dream, you might want to reconsider what you're doing. Not saying, like you said, to where the boat is not next to the dock, don't jump too early. But for me, that was when I was working for the big company. I just didn't have any bandwidth to make any progress or to research or have any new knowledge being gained. It was like 100% of my time and energy was dedicated toward that job. And I do think that can be a problem, is when an employer is asking too much from someone, it doesn't leave you any opportunity to even figure out what the next step is or to build into anything else. You're just, you're all in on that thing. And actually that was the same with the home healthcare agency. So there's something about carving out a schedule for yourself where it's like, okay, my bills are paid. I'm doing this. And I know that I have, let's call it like 10 or 15 hours a week on the side that I'm going to intentionally invest into my dream.
Father's Day sale happening right now. I need all you guys, if you haven't, man, get something for your dad, get something for your stepdad, get something for that father figure in your life.
Earlier I was saying that if you're emotionally stunted, this is a great way to say I love you without having to say it.
Yeah, that's actually a good pitch. It's a good pitch.
Yeah.
You can't use words.
Yeah.
You can't use words. Just get your dad a priest, provider, protector shirt.
Once a year, you can communicate that you love them by physical products.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So priest, provider, protector stuff available now. Prayer journal on sale for $19.99. All that great stuff. If you don't have the Blessed God Prayer Journal, if you don't have some of the merch, go scoop it up. Biggest sale of the year. All right. Later. Love you guys. Peace.